Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out. We are celebrating National Dog Day as it's drawing to a close with one of our very favorite people, Spencer Quinn, known to me as Peter Abrahams, his real name is, so I'm going to call him Peter because I just never can call him Spencer.
Most people do the same eventually.
Eventually.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
eventually.
So, as it happened, Peter had a medical incident that kept him from coming earlier, as you all know, but he's all recovered. And I thought it worked out super well that he could come on actual National Dog Day.
National Dog Day.
I know.
Okay, it was in the cards.
Excuse me, I dissuaded Pat King from bringing his Great Dane, who's called Humperdinck. And we thought about it. And then Scooter, those of you who've seen my adorable little white puppy, got bitten on the neck by a very big dog, and he's now had 2 surgeries. And but he seems to have. Right, I could have bought a car for those. But anyway, he seems
Anyone can buy a car if you have a good dog.
He seems to have made a good recovery. But the part that's so funny is, he has all this fluffy white fur, and in order to do the IVs, they had to shave his little legs from like here to here. So he looks like he's wearing booties. I mean, it's like a poodle cut. And I think he's embarrassed because he kind of keeps tucking his legs underneath him. Seriously.
No, I buy that completely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, how would Chet be if he,
Embarrassed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, humiliated, but
That's it.
He'd blow through it, but he would still, be unhappy.
I'm going to move forward because I'm looking at you or I'll just move the shrubbery aside. Right. So actually, the Chet and Bernie series was, in a way, born here in Pottsdale, as you might have all worked out. So I'm wearing the appropriate, sort of Southwestern, whatever
I
it
can
is,
see that.
to because you never do. You always show up in like pink.
Well, I'm showing up in pink tonight, but not always. It's going to be blue tomorrow. Okay.
Okay. Well, what?
I don't have Hawaiian pants, but every once in a while, because for people who don't know, the Chet and Bernie series, which is 15 books long now, and they can be read in any order. I always have to say that because they're narrated by Chet, who's a dog, and he would never bother about what order the books would be read in. There's so much to explain with these, but basically the Chet and Bernie series is based on, it's like a footstool with 3 legs. Leg 1 is these are detective novels narrated by a dog. Leg 2 is that the form of the novels, it goes all the way back to Sherlock Holmes, where the sidekick, leaving for the moment who the sidekick is in this series, where the sidekick tells the story in the first person and of the sidekick of the detective. So Bernie is the detective, Chet is the dog. And the third leg of the stool, and if the series works, it's because of this. This narrating dog, Chet, is not a talking dog. He's not a human wrapped in a dog suit. He doesn't know anything a dog shouldn't know. He's as canine as I can make him. And that, it makes him an unreliable narrator. And when you match the unreliable narrator to the form of a traditional mystery, which is actually a very strict form that's a lot like solving a real crime, where you accumulate a bunch of clues and draw a logical deduction. Well, Chet can't do that. He can't draw logical deductions, and even if he could, it's made up, a logical deduction is made up of all these clues. Well, there might be a clue happening right before his eyes, but at the same time he smells a leftover bologna sandwich under a sofa and goes for that and misses it. So he doesn't have all the clues. So when you match the unreliable narrator to this strict form, you've kind of blown it all up and made something new and possibly even fresh. And fresh is very good in the novel writing business. It's good to be fresh. You've probably read novels like in a series where you loved the first one and the second you loved it, like a second child, but you loved it a lot. And then the third one was good, but you actually found yourself pushing a little to get to the end, if you're the kind of person who has to get to the end. Okay, so what happened? It's the same writer, well, except for some weird stories that happen in the publishing business that I won't go into now, but it's the same writer doing all of them. Well, the answer is the writer ran out of enthusiasm for the project, and they're not fresh. You can't, this may be true of other parts of life too, but I'm not going to go that far, but you can't fake enthusiasm. Even if you have tons of writing technique and ability to structure scenes and even do good characters and even have the books be about something, you can't manufacture enthusiasm. That has to come from within. So the Chet and Bernie series, I just love writing in this voice. I love it more than I did when I started. And I think if they're fresh and they feel fresh to me, it's because of that. I love writing the voice. The other thing that's happened is, you know, when you set out on a journey like this, you don't know where you're going. And you make some discoveries along the way. For example, we're human beings, and the visual sense is very strong. So a lot of writing is described through the visual. Well, Chet's a dog. He's not a human being. He can see perfectly well, but if you know dogs, and on National Dog Day, we have to all know dogs, you know that their sense of smell and hearing are very powerful. Probably, I've known a number of dogs that are pretty much blind, but they can get along pretty well, as opposed to human beings who can't, right? I mean, they can go out in the world and they can do things. So a lot of the description, a lot of the information in the Chet and Bernie series is coming through other senses. So that was another thing that was unusual about it to me. But the central point, I don't know why I'm even going on and on. I guess Barbara asked me something completely different. But this is the background you have to understand before we
dog, right?
Before we get into the nitty gritty. This is the background, because there's going to be a test at the end of this. Don't worry, there's great inflation now. Everything will be fine. Okay, so I was once at the Tucson. Well, I've been a number of times to the Tucson Book Festival, which is a great festival, and so I was up with a couple of other writers on a stage on stools, you know, like now. Only I think we probably had a little more to drink prior than tonight. And someone in the audience said, "What about writer's block?" And the two other writers bemoaned writer's block and how horrible it is. And I said, "I've never had it." What? How is that possible? And I said, well, if I feel that I'm not sure where I'm going, I take a step back and think of the beating heart of the story, the engine that's driving it, the spirit of the book. Okay, a lot of books don't have that. But I'm not going to name any, but a lot don't. But so if what's the beating heart? What's the engine that makes the Chet and Bernie? It's the love between Chet and Bernie. If I take that step back, a narrative route suggests itself. Whatever comes next has to be about or reflect or change or show us a new angle on the love between Chet and Bernie. So that's really all you need to know about the Chet and Bernie series.
So, you know, oftentimes I think people who haven't read it might assume that this is a cozy series, you know, and it's not. I mean, you know, it's actually a private eye story with you know, a dog as the Watson and the whole thing. But Peter hasn't mentioned he has a real gift for humor, and the problem with most humorous concepts, whether it's, you know, on television, remember Laugh In when it was really funny for like 2 years and then not so funny? With humor, you have to keep escalating it because, you know, there's a certain sort of shock value or something that comes into it. And so one of the things I think I really admire about this series is that you have kept the humor, you know, roughly at the same level of intensity. So it hasn't turned into caricature, which is all too easy to do. And which I think readers get tired, you know, they get exhausted with it after a while, or it just becomes a cliche.
No, I agree with you completely on that. You have to be strict with yourself as a writer. You can't indulge yourself. And in other words, you have to be the sternest critic of your work. There's no question. But I'm going to make an admission. It has to stay in this room. Okay, this is between the four walls because it's not the kind of. It's not the kind
of. Cover your ears.
Yeah, and you guys, you know, turn off your laptops. I think since childhood I've had a way of looking at things. So I'm now going to do something I've never done. I'm going to tell a story about me in nursery school, in pre-kindergarten. So I wish I could remember this. I think so. My
Chet,
it's a
actually,
long
he's
time ago.
channeling Chet, right?
My-
right here.
My mom came to pick me up from school, and the teacher told her this story. The story was we were going for a walk, but it was an imaginary walk. It was raining outside, and every day we went for a walk in school, but it was raining, so we walked indoors. But it was an imaginary walk. So in other words, like the teacher would say, okay, there's a stop sign, and we would all come to it. There wasn't a stop sign. It's in the classroom. But we would all come to a stop, okay? Okay, do you see the thing? So we're walking along in the classroom, and the teacher says, oh, there's a puddle. And all the kids walked around the quote, unquote, puddle. Except for me, I walked through the puddle. And the teacher said, Petey, I was called Petey, what about the puddle? And I said, I've got boots on. Okay, so that, whatever that is, never went away. So it's in my DNA. So maybe it annoys some people, but it's very hard to cap that well.
Well, I think you're brilliant. But I have to say that if you've ever had a chance to read Peter's books as Peter, and they were thrillers, that some of them were really quite dark.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so your metamorphosis, so to speak, into Spencer Quinn has been a delightful surprise, because the last book I think you wrote as Peter Abrahams was one of the most heartbreaking books I can remember reading. The narrator all the way through is dying of asbestos exposure, and he's trying to finish something before he dies. And you don't want him to die. As a reader, you keep waiting for like a miraculous cure or something. And, that was just
that was nerve damage.
Wrenching book.
Let me recommend it.
It's a great book.
Because it's some books, and this one, A Farewell to Arfs, also began with what you might call just a single hook, a single idea for the plot. And the one for nerve damage was, what would happen if you got to read your obituary? Their obituaries are certainly of any person of note, is written long before you die. So they're all set to roll with it when you do, and they just put in the date, and print. So what if you get to see your obituary and there's a mistake in it? And you didn't understand something key about your life, and now the clock is ticking, you're not going to be around very long. That was what... so this character, who's a sculptor, and that's how he got the asbestosis, working with materials like that, realizes he didn't understand a huge thing about his wife, long gone, and starts to really... It's really an amateur sleuth story. He starts to look into what happened and seeing if he can, trying to do it before he's gone. And this whole other world grows. So I think there's humor in it. I remember there's a hockey scene that's pretty funny because he lives in northern Maine or somewhere like that. So, but this one, okay, so the idea of this one, there's a lot of scamming that goes on now, of course. And one of the new wrinkles in scamming uses AI to sample voices and replicate them, so that, let's say you had a little snippet of some young man's voice, you could then compose an AI version of it, and use that, say, turn into a request to his grandmother or something like that for money, and it'll sound just like him. There'll be it's perfect, and that's already being done. So I thought, what if someone with superb hearing? You see, AI is made from, it's all about sampling humans, right? it's all about us. It's artificial human intelligence. They don't say that, but that's what it is. What if a being with some other kind of intelligence, okay, who wasn't used to mine the bricks you're using to build this AI, what if would he too be fooled? In other words, would Chet be fooled by the sound of an imitation human voice? That was the idea that I want. So the case that was going to be discussed comes out of that idea in A Farewell to Arfs. That's. Oh, I have to point out something. So a lot readers suggest titles, and I have a whole big file on them, and I've used a number. And if your title is suggested on pub date, you get a signed copy of the book. So this was. I love the title. And I went with it. Wow. I'm hearing every day. Is this the last one in the series? Because it has farewell in it. It's too late to have them put a little, parenthesis, but no, or something on the bottom.
Good point. Well, before we say anything further about that, let's talk for a moment about Mrs. Plansky. Did any of you read Mrs. Plansky? It's an absolutely wonderful book, and it was conceived as a standalone, wasn't it?
It was conceived as a standalone, yes.
But it turned out to be so good that, in fact, Mrs. Plansky will return next summer. If you haven't read it, I really recommend it. And it's another one where it's a very serious subject, but Peter uses his humor. And I like it because Mrs. Plansky, who is just a little bit younger than I am, is able to really.
About the same.
Yeah, no.
And you look younger, so.
Never. Well, I don't know that I'd go to Romania and just kick ass to get my money back like she. Although, to be fair, I would never have fallen for the scam in the first place. So
no, you wouldn't have. I couldn't. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Yeah. So the next Mrs. Plansky is called Mrs. Plansky Goes Rogue, and
it's already gone rogue. So this is another rogue.
Yes, and so these. If you haven't read it, she's a 71-year-old widow, recent widow in Florida, and sort of the tower of strength in her family, and a very capable person, but someone you could maybe, she's older, right? And people take advantage of that. And this is really how she responds. But Mrs. Plansky Goes Rogue was inspired by the pirate stories I read when I was a kid. And there are a lot of Bahamian scenes in it and a lot of underwater scenes because I love writing Bahamian and underwater scenes. When I was in college and after, like as a summer job, I worked as a spear fisherman in the Bahamas, and I, which was done all through free diving, and I had all these watery experiences, and they never really went away. So I loved mining that little territory. So Mrs. Plansky Goes Rogue has some diving and some Bahamian stuff in it.
So what are the implications for Chet? Will there be a delay then?
Well, the next Chet and Bernie novel will be out. So Mrs. Plansky Goes Rogue comes out next summer, and the next Chet and Bernie will be the following.
So there's going to be a gap.
Well, yes. Okay. So I made a decision. So there was probably when I was writing for younger readers, there was probably a 10 to 12 year period where I wrote 2 books a year, one adult and one kids book, younger readers. So a couple of them are fairly dark thrillers, Reality Check, that won the Edgar Award, and Bullet Point. And then I did a trilogy that I just am sort of proud of, the Echo Falls trilogy. And then I did 2 dog narrated, and one a cat and dog narrated, and one dog narrated for Scholastic. So that's really the extent of and now I've decided I'm going to write 1 book a year, which I know to a lot of writers sounds like a lot, but what are they doing? Right? You're talking about 80 or 90,000 words. So, every day do 500 or 600. You can do the math, and there's plenty of year left over. I don't know what I'd do if I have things I like to do. There's a lot of family. I like to play tennis. I like to ride my bike, go to the gym, all this kind of thing. But in a normal day, there'd be a 4 or 5 hour hole. What would I be doing? right? Whereas I love to sit down and write. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm sorry isn't going to be a Chet and Bernie. I guess this is an apology. I'm sorry there isn't going to be a Chet and Bernie
I
next
was
summer.
hoping we could nudge you towards like a Christmas novella.
Well, there have been 2 Chet and Bernie Christmas
I know.
novels.
And so why can't there be another one
Christmas novella.
that you could bring out, for example, in October
You
or
see,
November?
This is the kind of thing, right?
Listen, I mean, come on, give me credit. I nudged you into doing
Yes,
something
okay.
different with Chet and
I'll
Bernie.
think about it. I'll think about
And
it.
we'd all feel happier, right?
Okay, I want you
Plus,
to be
there are
happy.
some even dissier titles you could get for a Christmas Chet and Bernie. than
I've got
you
a whole.
can.
Okay, I have a separate file of Christmas Chet and Bernie
Absolutely.
that have been sent in.
I know, too funny. All right, so here we are in the desert with Chet and Bernie, which means that the land, because you live in a totally different landscape, but you've been out here so often that
Yes.
it's familiar to you. But the landscape, in part, plays a role in this book.
Oh,
for
it's huge.
Yeah, so talk to us about that.
Well, so I had to decide in the beginning where I was going to set this series, and I love Arizona. A lot of things about it, not just the look of it, but the people. There's just something. There's a vibe here, and but I wanted it to be set in a big metropolitan type area, of which there's really only one in Arizona. But I wanted that area to be surrounded by vast wilderness because Chet's a dog, right? And he could have all these, wilderness type wild creatures and wilderness adventures. And so much of the history of the Old West and everything is right out there, because it used to be that the megalopolis wasn't here. And that's a thought that's very much in Bernie's mind because he comes from an old Arizona family, and that comes up in this book a lot. And things about his early past are in this book, which I really enjoyed writing, and he finds out things about his father he never knew. So that's why I wanted this. Now, on the point of not living where you're writing, that to me is a plus. I live on Cape Cod. I don't think I've ever written anything about Cape Cod. I would not do a good job, even though I've lived there for decades. And the reason is this: if I'm living in the place, my descriptions are going to be journalistic. If I'm writing about Arizona and I'm not there, I have to reimagine it. And that reimagining, it's like, do you remember that style of cartoon that was on TV where the characters didn't really move, but they just wiggled like this? In other words, they had a little weird life going on. So that can be on the page. And I think reimagining, the reader doesn't reimagine, the reader just reads it. But the reimagining is a little kind of fizz that's in the prose that they pick up on, and it makes it much more interesting to read the descriptions when that little fizz is there. That's my...
So give us, at least kick off the plot. What is the instigating incident? As crime novels usually have one.
Well, the instigating... Okay, so Bernie and Chet live in a fairly modest part of town. Not like Pottsdale, for example, which... and there's some
actually a few modest parts of Scottsdale.
Absolutely. But but it's and they have neighbors. On one side is this elderly couple, the Parsons, and both of whom are in terrible health shape. And they have a little dog called Iggy, who's Chet's best buddy. Only Iggy never gets out, and the reason is an electric fence salesman came to sell the Parsons an electric fence, which they bought, but they've never been able to work it properly. So now they have the worst of both worlds, where Iggy doesn't get out. They have in their front hall, they have a big vertical window, and Iggy stands there, on his hind legs, and tries, and that's how Chet sees him, because Chet's out and free, and Iggy is not. Although every once in a while he does get free, and I love writing scenes when Iggy is on the loose. Anyway, Bernie and Chet come home, and they discover that old Mr. Parsons has been scammed out of, well, he doesn't think he thinks it's a small amount, but it turns out to be most of what they have, by his son, but he doesn't accept it as a scam at all, and believes it's just a mistake. Anyway, Bernie and Chet go to find his son, and the old couple is desperate. So that's the way it starts, and it leads into all sorts of things about AI and poker, and I believe Doc Holliday is mentioned. And Bernie tries to play at a table where Doc Holliday actually sat down, but so that basically that's it. I don't want to give away too much, right, because it's a mystery.
It's very true, but there are some like desert chase scenes, so we're not just entirely urban.
Oh no! Oh
book.
yes! Oh no! So they're definitely out in the desert. Oh yes! Okay, so one of the characters, Holger Nyberg, who is a brilliant. There's some very brilliant people in this book. Okay, Milo Morster. Milo Morster runs a sort of space program from out in the desert. Okay, and is maybe the most brilliant one of all. And then he has Holger Nyberg, who had worked for him and then had lost a lot of money playing poker and ended up in prison, but he's brilliant too. And in fact, it's Holger who says something that comes close to understanding what's really going on. He has developed this theory about AI, that aliens, the theory of alien AI. Why are we talking about this? Okay, if there was an alien species that was smarter than us and created their AI, right, which is all based on sampling the totality of knowledge, but the alien's totality of knowledge would be way bigger than ours. And so Holger tells Bernie that a third party, but Bernie finds out that these aliens would know instantly that our AI wasn't human, that it was a fake. This sort of in the sort of reverse of where Chet is coming from. Maybe that sounded boring. In the book, I kind of liked it, because what it's about, there's a lot of, I would say, okay, I don't editorialize, but have you noticed that there are a lot of very, very bright, high-tech people in this country who have huge dreams and plans and are kind of soaring away from us? I mean, they're taking our tax money to do it, but they're soaring away. All right. So the fact that the name Milo Morster might remind you of Elon Musk is coincidental.
Certainly, right.
But so anyway, what this is. Let's circle back to at the very beginning. I said when you set out on a journey like this, you make discoveries. Well, I never thought in the beginning that I'd be able to sort of peripherally tackle questions like this that I just mentioned without slowing down the story. Okay, I meant the most important thing of it all is don't slow down the story. Everything you write has to advance the story. Let's say I think of this scene where a swan in the evening, the light is turning purple and purpling the wings of a swan on a pond in the evening. And I just think, oh, what a beautiful thing. How the hell did you write everything so beautiful? But it didn't advance the plot, so it's out. If it doesn't advance the story, it's gone, no matter.
Have somebody shoot the swan.
Or the swan is quickly pulled out of sight.
That's right.
Absolutely, and then you can do it.
See, there are ways.
Yes.
You just have to.
Yes.
You have to think about it,
You
right?
can, yeah.
Yep, I love it. I mean, one of the things I love about Peter's books is that there's always the unexpected. You know, I mean, this kind of a story unfolds in an investigation generally unfolds in a straightforward manner. Sometimes, if it's a cold case or whatever, there's certain back and forth in time, but you know, there's something that happens, and then there's a reason to investigate it, and eventually you get to whatever it is that you discover, right? I mean, so it's generally a linear kind of a plot, but the great thing about Chet is that it can zigzag around, you know, because he is not a linear thinker.
He's not a linear thinker. And it's a lot of fun to do this in a non-linear way and still end up with something that makes sense. See, the attraction of the linear is that no matter how boring it is, it's going to make sense. You know, I'll be able to tie it up at the end. I'll be able to tie up all the loose ends because I'm doing a linear thing, A to Z. I don't operate that way. Partly because I was born not to operate that way. But the other thing is, my mom was a writer, and she taught me most of what I know about writing. And there's a zillion things, I won't go into any of them, except don't do anything the way other people do it in writing. That was her. Don't do originality in every, not just the occasional original thing, or the title is original, or some character's never been, everything.
How many books have you written? I should have counted up.
Me too. It's in the late 40s. It's in the late 40s.
So a lot.
What?
A lot, in other words.
I don't know. Like, okay, George Simenon, right, who did the Maigret books?
Over 100.
There are over 100 of those, and I think he wrote maybe 400 novels. During that, do you know Maigret, Inspector Maigret? Okay, he was he was French, but Inspector Maigret is Belgian, or is it the opposite? Anyway,
no, you're right.
Anyway, they're good. A lot of them are really good. He could write one in a week. At the same time, he had a wife, a mistress who lived in the same house. He had relationships with the maid and the other maid and girlfriends on the side. Okay, and he had all this going, which, I mean, is amusing in a way and in another way not, right? Because we're dealing with some sort of creative monster. But the writing of the Maigret series is good.
I've always thought that, sex fueled him. I mean, maybe all the adrenaline from, his busy sex life, which was legendary, helped with the creativity.
I mean, there are two schools of thought on that.
The other is that you're exhausted.
One, where it just ended career after, I mean, well, who knows, right? Yeah.
I mean, and actually, they've been televised, and if you ever, it's called Inspector Maigret, Maigret, and they're kind of the old ones are really kind of a period
who played?
piece.
He was terrific. Was he a French actor?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was terrific. He was a bulky, slow-moving, not really attractive, guy, but he really fit the role. But so the name Maigret. Everything is thought out. So I like names that are kind of suggestive too. So in French, so he's spelling it Maigret, Maigret. But Maig without the T means thin, skinny. Meager means meager, and the character, of course, is the opposite of that. So.
Legendary career. You have maybe 60 books to go then.
Okay, well, that's probably not going to happen, but I have no, as long as I can do it, I'm doing it. So.
Well, if I remember right, you haven't, up until Chet and Bernie, most of your novels, or at least a lot of them, were standalones, right?
I started with 17 standalones.
Right.
So the first series I wrote was the Echo Falls ones for
the younger readers.
For younger readers.
Right.
Yeah.
So how has this been? You've talked about what fun it is and all, but having written all these standalones, which every time you had to create a universe and create characters and the whole bit, and that I think was part of your creativity. It kept you interested. How have you dealt with Chet and Bernie, where you've already created their world and their characters? How do you manage to keep yourself excited?
Well, the thing is the benefit of it, of course, is that setting out, you have the two main characters and the setting usually, and even supporting characters, because there are a whole bunch of repeating supporting characters. So that's, in a way, very good. But what I like to do is shine lights on little areas that haven't been shone on them before. Yep. Which then can lead to a whole different kind of story. So
absolutely, but I was not surprised when Mrs. Plansky came along, because I thought, you were probably ready to write something different.
Yes. So and going back to the third person. But it wasn't the first time I did that, because I also wrote a book called The Right Side, which was pretty dark, and it's about a woman with PTSD a warrior woman coming back severely injured to America from the war, and I still hear about it from, well, it's not that old even, but veterans a lot. But it's dark. It's pretty dark, but it ends not as dark.
All right. Well, how about questions from the audience? Any of you'd like to ask questions?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious about your daily writing practice. So do you sit down for a set amount of time and just write, like you said, 500 words or whatever amount of words? Or are you running around all day with Chet in your head and you go, oh, I need to write that down. Chet should say that. Or
Okay, first of all, it's a great question. Should I repeat it?
Yes.
Okay. So this excellent question is, what's my writing? How do I, my writing day, what's my practice? How do I do it? Do I just do it in a set period of time, or do I just wander around with a notebook and pencil waiting, praying to God that something will come to me? Okay, it's more the first. Okay, here's my day. I get up, make coffee, then I usually, some kind of exercise happens. I either go to the gym, ride my bike, or play tennis. Then I come back and I'm very, very hungry. I eat a kind of brunch. It's almost the same every day. Then I go to my office. So we live overlooking a salt marsh on Cape Cod. There's the house and then a detached garage. So I have like this 15-foot commute. But it's important psychologically, and over the garage, right where the cars are, is like this room, and that's my office. And so I sit down, and I see, I just, if I'm in the middle of a chapter, I just pick up where I was. Sometimes the day before, I'll stop in the middle of a sentence. I always stop before I've come to the end of what I know I can do. And that can sometimes be, and so, well, what's easier than picking up in the middle of a sentence? It's half done, you know what's coming, and there you are. You're suddenly writing again. And I try to do 1,000 words a day. I hardly ever do, except toward the end of a book. But at least the following day when I sit down, I've advanced the story. So I like to advance the story in two ways. One, the way I was talking about before, everything in it, and then two, day by day, making it bigger. So when I get to the end of a chapter, I go over it. I read it over and to see if there are problems. And problems announce themselves as just like little bells going off, warning bells in your mind. We get them in normal life all the time, right? So something's bothering you. And we ignore them because you drive yourself crazy. But in this one area, I don't. If I get a warning bell, I don't leave that chapter. So sometimes the mistake is 5 pages earlier where I didn't set it up right. What I did on the page where the warning bell is fine, but it's not properly set up. So I go back, fix it, and then I'm at the end of the chapter. So when I get to the end of the book, for example, when I get to the end of A Farewell to Arfs, I finished it on a Friday, but it's basically been done. I emailed it to the editor on Monday. I went over it one more time on the weekend. I think I changed the name, a couple of little things, and then so that's my method. So trying to work every day. Now, I don't always, but trying to. It's very rare that I would have 2 days with no working. That almost never happens. And that way you're never really out of it, right? You're never out of the ball game. You're there. Now, in terms of if some idea comes to you randomly, as you also mentioned, yes, that happens. It often happens on bike rides, but that's not the reason I go on bike rides. I go on this beautiful bike path we have on Cape Cod, and I especially like in the winter because no one's out there. It's too cold. But I'm out there. I don't do it if it's icy. But sometimes you're riding along and there's no one there, and it's like an idea. The whole idea for Mrs. Plansky's Revenge came on a bike ride. Just, I got home from my bike ride. I wrote up a paragraph, sent it to my agent. She said, I said, what do you think of this? And she said, do it. So that can happen. Also at night, you can wake up with an idea. So for many years, I would have like a little pad of paper and a pen, and I would write whatever was at night. And I'd wake up in the morning and it was illegible. So I don't do that anymore. Well, you can't drive yourself mad, right? That's no
You
life.
leave your phone home when you're on a bike ride so that you're not
Oh, I
tempted to
never
like
take
talk
the, oh,
into
no, the
it.
phone doesn't come to the gym. It doesn't come
Right.
to bike ride or tennis or anything like that.
Did you read about the truck driver that had a terrible accident here and killed I don't remember how many people, and they determined that he was watching TikTok videos? And I think to myself, it's hard for me to sort of grasp how people lose. I see people walking around, all on their phone while they're just about to step into manholes or, cars are coming by or something. And I think phones have kind of created this, I don't know what, bubble or shield or something around a lot of people where they think, they can dwell in the phone, but also in real life at the same time. So I'm happy to know that you're not like,
No, that's
composing while you're
no, and,
writing.
and my phone isn't always with me, even at other times. Okay. Like I often lose it.
Well, I have the same problem. I lose it here in the store all the time, and people are finding it. But I was just worried that there you were writing along with one hand, dictating
no,
into your
both
phone.
hands.
Okay.
Both hands at all times.
Who's next? Who else would like to ask the question?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know, like, I mean, I'm sure this comes easy to you at this point, but maybe it was tougher at the beginning, but how do you know if your story is, like, I don't know the right word to say, but, like, thick enough where you have enough of a main plot and, like, enough woven in of, like, kind of B plots to carry an entire book?
Oh, okay. You mean in the conception phase when you're thinking? Okay, so I love this question. When you're thinking up a book, how do you know that your idea has enough potential material in it to make a whole story? That's a great question. I'm glad I never asked myself that because it's the kind of thing that could scare you off. And I mean that now fairly seriously. I wouldn't worry about it. See what happens. If it isn't going to happen, then maybe you've got one of these novellas that Barbara's talking about, right? So yeah, to paralyze yourself with, and sometimes the doubts are right, but to paralyze yourself is never good, and it's really good to start. You can do only so much ruminating, and then you start, because you've given yourself nothing to work with, really, except in here. Once you've got something there, a character says something, and all of a sudden, another character has to say something after that, and then that character says something that maybe you hadn't thought of quite, and it's pretty interesting, and there's 30 more pages down the road, right? So that would be my answer to that. You never really, really know.
How are you tapping into Chet while you're doing that? Did Chet talks to you?
No, Chet, okay, the voice of Chet, the transition to writing in the voice of Chet is very easy for me. I just sit down and the voice of Chet is happening.
I love that. How wonderful.
Okay, so
Right. Yeah,
I put my
that's
boots
right.
on. Thank
Isn't that a
you. Yeah,
great
I put
story?
my
I'm going
boots
to
on.
remember that.
Yeah,
I think that's wonderful.
yeah.
What about the puddle? I was wearing my
Yeah.
boots. Great. I saw another hand back there. Oh, Gina.
Gina.
So, kind of talking about voice coming so easily, I know Chet doesn't age and isn't going to age, but have you felt he has grown?
Oh, what a great question. Okay, so Chet, as Gina points out so wisely, Chet isn't going to age. Okay, at the beginning of this series, which I want to say again can be read in any order, but I think after tonight's talk you can probably figure out why. But after the first book, anyway, in one of the books early in the series, Chet has one of those little, lumps, tags that are removed in biopsy. And I thought, I'm going to do one of those shaggy dog things and not have the results of the biopsy come until the next book. Okay, I began getting these emails all in caps. The all in caps kind of email. If anything happens to Chet, I will never read another word you write. Now, from my point of view, he's the main character and the narrator in a continuing series. Why would I be so suicidal? But I didn't say that. I just promised every email, Chet will not. And also I made a decision that he's not going to age. And really all the characters aren't really aging very much either. Well, why do they have to, right? I mean, we know what's going
No,
on.
I think you're very wise.
We're in a, it's a thing where they have a lot of adventures in an enclosed space and time. There's a lot we still don't understand about space and time, so it's possible. Yes, ma'am.
So you talk about being able to read these in any order. Yes, there's a different story, but you always bring up things from the past, certain characters and things like that. And, if you haven't read all the stories, you don't know about these, it'll give you an incentive to go back and find that. But I think those of us who have read them, in order, we get a chuckle out of that every time we read about, Peanut or, whichever character from the past, because we know what happened.
Yes, I think that. Yes, so the way I've tried to solve your point is very right. This question's about, well, more of a comment really, how you can read them in any order, but certain cases from the past are referenced, and some of those cases from the past that are referenced actually haven't been written about. They're just referenced, and that's it. But usually when I do that, I give you enough backstory in this book so that you'll understand, so it won't be a thing where, what's he talking about, and that it won't bring you up short. But thanks for reading them. Let me say that.
Did you have a question, sir? When you started writing Chet, did you find that you had to do some research about dogs?
Okay, another excellent question. When I started writing Chet, did I find I had to do research about dogs? The kind of yes and no. We've always had dogs. So, and remember I described, where, where I write. So, okay, so we've always had sometimes 3 at a time. And what is a writer doing a lot of the time? Well, staring out the window. And while I was staring out the window, I would watch these 3 or 2 or however many dogs we have doing things. Like suppose a coyote came up out of the marsh. What would happen then? Or if one tried to catch a squirrel, or this or that. So here's something that really happened. It was just amazed me. We had this dog named Charlie. He was a beautiful golden retriever, the kind with a huge head, a noble head. There was nothing in it, but he had. He's a warm-hearted. We all adored him, but there's nothing. So Charlie was a follower, basically, of the others because he had no ideas. But one thing he did was shocking. So I could see. So we would get deliveries from time to time. Like there'd be the UPS truck or the FedEx. And sometimes Charlie would run down to the road, and sometimes he wouldn't. But he would run down to the road before the trucks came. And then I noticed he only did it for the FedEx truck and not for the UPS truck, but he would do the running before you could see them. And then I noticed that the FedEx guy gave him treats and the UPS guy didn't. There's a railroad bridge that you have to cross to get to our house, but you can't see it. He could hear, but you can hear. Well, he could hear, I can't. He could hear the difference of the trucks, and he wouldn't bother to go for the UPS. Okay, so I picked up that osmosis, that kind of thing. The only thing I researched, like in books, was dog vision. And I was just delighted to find that it isn't all really nailed down yet, scientifically. Well, that's what the writer wants to find. Because if it is nailed down and you make a mistake, then you get the emails all in caps again. So that's all that was the extent of my research on dogs.
Fine.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see you back there.
What age did you start writing?
Oh, I didn't hear that. Say it again, honey.
What age did you start writing?
What age did I start writing? Well, you mean writing? I wrote in school, like assignments, right? Do you ever? Okay, let me ask you a question. In school, are you ever asked to write a story, like not an essay about George Washington or something like that, but a story that you make up? Does that ever happen? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's when I started to. That same kind of thing, but I didn't. But that's when, I've probably gone on too long. But I mean, that's when my mom, that's how she would teach me, right? She would read over some of these writings of mine. And critique them. And I learned a lot from that. I really think it's really important in school to have a chance to write stories that are made up. And also it's really important for the teachers to actually teach you how to do good sentences and how to put them together and how to find the best word, that kind of thing. I don't know if that goes on anymore or if it ever did. Were there others?
Was there one more hand somewhere? Yeah.
So when you came up with this concept of AI, was it fueled by just news, or did something happen that made you go, I should make more of a statement about this?
Well, it's probably both. Like, well, how did I get interested in AI for this book? Because it's sort of in the air right now. And Chet and Bernie are live and in the air, and they just, and of course, things like this are, everything's happening very fast, and that's when things are happening fast, there are a lot of not so good people who like when things are going fast, because a lot of doors open for someone who immediately sees in something new a chance to get rich quick, and I think this is another way. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, although it's obviously going to destroy us as a race. But other than that, I'm good with it. Yes. Yeah.
When I'm reading the Chet and Bernie books, I'm always trying to kind of pinpoint where in the valley they are, the locations are. I'm wondering if you have particular locations in mind, like they're in Cave Creek right now.
Okay. Things have happened that are based on Cave Creek. It's certainly Pottsdale, but it's all made up because I didn't want to. And it's never called Phoenix. It's the Valley. And in fact, it isn't until book 6 that Chet finds out that they live in Arizona. Well, with a long series, you can take a thread and weave it in way, way later. So in book 6 is The Sound and the Furry. That's the first one where they leave Arizona and they go to Louisiana. And Bernie is questioning some witness. This is on page 93. And the witness said, a potential witness, and the witness says, "You're not from here, are you?" Here's how Bernie talks. "You're not from here, are you?" And Bernie says, "No, we're from Arizona." And the next line is, "We were from Arizona. I'd wondered about that." So Chet finds out on page 93. So So it's the Valley. It's never called Phoenix, and I would say, in a way, it has maybe a bit more the vibe of Tucson, but blown up a bit. That's what I'd say.
Well, you've been a great audience. Thank you very much for coming tonight. We have reached a point, John. Do we have some numbers we gave out? Thank you. Somebody sent me, along with the book they were hoping I would actually read, not Peter's book, something called Pet Botanics, Training Rewards the Voice of Top Trainers. So I have that. But what I also have is Paula Mounier, who is in the same general umbrella of publishing as is Peter, has a series in which the dog is not the narrator, but there is a dog called Elvis, who is, if I remember right, a military dog, isn't he? That's retired. Yeah. Anyway, she's coming to see us in October, and I'm really very fond of this series. So if you'd like to pick a number between 1 and, what was it, 12, John? 12. Yeah, thank you. Pick a number, and we will give the book to whoever has the number.
Oh, do I say it?
Yeah. No, we're going to...
I didn't see how this was working, obviously.
Where's Chet?
Can't be beyond 2.
Yeah, it can't be beyond 2, of course. The number I picked is 9.
Okay. Is there a number 9? Are you there? You don't have to prove it.
It's been a long day.
Right, okay. And since I brought this along, you have to be a dog owner in order to take this home. But is everybody here a dog owner? Generally? Okay, then we need another number. Not 9.
3.
Well,
Number 3.
actually, I have 3, but I'm not a dog owner.
You're not a dog owner. Oh, okay.
11.
That's you. Okay. Well, then you get to, and I won't guarantee you anything, but it looked like an interesting package. So thank you all very much. If you would like to have Peter sign a book, you want to take a photo with him or whatever, if you wouldn't fold up your chair and stick it over on that wall, and have a safe drive home. Thanks for coming out.
Thank
And
you.
happy Labor Day. Here we go. Let me grab the microphone.
Hi.
It's been too many years. How have you been?
Good. How are you?
Good.